What is going on, everybody? This is the Pinstripe Chronicles. I am Tats. I am here with Rob, and baseball season is just a day away where pitchers and catchers will officially report. It was just a long off season, not a lot of movement, so it just seemed to drag on that much more. So going into spring training, Rob, where do you see this team needing to put the majority of its focus?
Shortstop and left field. Once we get to the spring where all the players are there, I think we know what the rotation is going to be. Whether Nestor's going to be there on opening day or not is a big question, but we know who the starters are going to be. We know who's going to be in the bullpen. We got to figure out who's in left field, who runs away with that job, and if they're going to roll with the youth at short or they're going to give it to IKF again, which would be a bad idea. So that's really what the focus has to be, is figuring out shortstop and left field.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think some of the fundamentals. I think we're gonna see this year in baseball. And what's going on, Mazza? How's it going? And what's going on, Brad? But I think part of the focus also needs to be on fundamental baseball. We're gonna see this year. They're going to, they're increasing the size of the bag. Okay, so I think that puts the emphasis on your defense and also your speed, because there's going to be a bigger window, especially with some of these younger guys that have, strong legs. I want to see a lot more base stealing. I think that's going to be something that I think throughout baseball we're going to see a big uptick in. But it's also going to be, you're going to need some strong arms, in third base and shortstop, because you're going to need to beat these runners out. So I think that's part of where the emphasis, like you were saying, with shortstop really comes into play. And I think the youth is the way to go with that. I think IKF needs to be that bench player that we've been really needing, because he can be speed off the bench in the later parts of the game, where you have somebody like a Peraza or maybe even Volpe, depending on how everything works out in spring training, that you can really just emphasize the youth.
Yeah, the thing is, with the bigger bases, we already have a great defense, so I'm not worried about that. We had the best defense in baseball, I believe, in the American League, actually, with the team Gold Glove or something like that. So I'm not concerned about our defense at all. In fact, it should be better if we rolled Peraza at short over IKF. Donaldson's fine at third base defensively. LeMahieu and Torres will do their job at second. We know what Rizzo is going to bring at first. Trevino's fantastic behind the plate. And with the bigger base, he's got a good arm as well. He can throw guys out behind the plate as well. I'm not worried about that. The outfield, Judge, Bader, can't get too much better than those two out there in center field and right. But it really comes down to left field. Can Aaron Hicks, who is actually analytically better left fielder than center fielder, can he be that guy? Doubtful. Maybe he could, maybe he can't. Can it go to someone like Cabrera, who I do feel is better in right field, though, than left field? Maybe it's someone like Ortega, or maybe even Florial runs away with it. But to me, it's left field has to be figured out. And also the base stealing is another thing, because they were doing that last year in the first half. And that's why I brought it up months ago when I said I feel like this team, Aaron Boone, managed two different ways in the first half and the second half, because when we started losing games, they went away from that completely. They weren't running. They weren't stealing bases. Everything, all the fundamentals that they were doing went away. And that's why I feel like Cashman took the reins over again, because they were playing like the 2021 Yankees instead of the 2022 Yankees in the first half. That's why I said I feel like Boone's managing two different ways. They need to get back to that and stick with that, because with the bigger bases, you're going to have more speed. Peraza, Bader, even Hicks, if he's in there. Florial is in there. Judge, he can take a bag. Torres, he can take a bag. They're going to have to start using the speed on this team that we do have and take some bases and score some extra runs, because that's how you win. That's how you win games, and that's how we won games last year up until July and August and playoffs.
There's something about Judge's game that really isn't brought up enough, and that is his speed on the bases. For a guy his size, he actually gets a very good jump on a pitcher when he wants to steal a base. And it seems more times than not that he's fairly successful. So I think this is really going to be, if the Yankees play like you mentioned, if they play last year's first half throughout the season, I think we're looking at a much more successful feeling where you saw in that second half they kind of, once they started to hit the skids, they reverted back to some bad habits, trying to just find something rather than just sticking with what was working and let the slump work its way through. So if they were able to do that this year, and with some of the infusion of the youth, because I really think that you're going to see that this year, my gut tells me that Peraza is going to win the job, and IKF is going to be the bench player like we had expected, like a Tyler Wade to be. That in a blowout game, you want to get somebody off their feet, but you want somebody competent off the bench to take a position or be a base runner. IKF can be that player that we need. So Cabrera could also be one of those guys that you don't want to see. As much as I said that I would be very comfortable if they had him in left field, the more you think about it and the more you break down his ability and what he can bring to the team, keeping him versatile and as a classic utility player, I think that's where his value is really going to shine brightest.
Yeah, I think if he doesn't win the job, which he probably won't, they're going to trade him because they have too many infielders. If you think about it, Rizzo, Torres, Peraza, and LeMahieu are your starting infield. That leaves Donaldson on the bench. That leaves whoever doesn't get the left field job on the bench. So it could be Cabrera. You have to have the backup catcher, and then you have one other spot. So do they want to give it to another infielder? Because they're going to have too many infielders. Because you're not going to rotate Donaldson and IKF off the bench and Cabrera because they're going to look for ways to get him involved because he can also play the infield really well. He can play shortstop. I don't think there's a need for it. If IKF doesn't make the team or doesn't win the starting job, they should look to move him because I would rather have a true backup outfielder on the bench because we don't really have that. Cabrera, to me, he's not an outfielder, even though I know he played well there last year.
Yeah,
but that was right field. He's a traditional infielder. He can play all over the place. So I don't want to label him as just one position. We kind of need that guy because let's assume Hicks gets it, right? Hicks wins the job in the spring. He's your left fielder, which it looks like that's going to be the case. Who's the backup? Because they're not going to put Stanton out there. They don't want to put Stanton out there in left field, at least in Yankee Stadium. So who is the real backup to him? Is it Cabrera? Because I don't trust that because they want to put him all over the place. So it could be Florial. Because if they don't keep him, they got to get rid of him. So if IKF's on the bench, you have no real need to use him just for his speed. You might as well get rid of him and his $6 million and use that elsewhere.
Yeah, I think holding back the youth last year in last year's offseason is put the Yankees in a really bad situation where they have too many infielders. They don't have enough outfield depth. Although, Spencer Jones could be a factor. You mentioned his name's Ortega. There are options that they have. Florial's another one. I've been a big Florial, fan for a while. And I'd like to see him finally, maybe get a fair shake for a change, not just come up for a game and then sit for 5. So we're getting into that situation where we have, like what we started last year, where we had too many infielders. Now you're adding 2 more with Peraza and Volpe. And they really needed to move some players this offseason, and they didn't do that. So I think what it's going to have to come down to is spring training performance, where you have a real competition for the job. I think that's what it's got to be. If put the contracts to the side, if they're playing and they're adjusting their game well enough, then they get the job. Contracts be damned.
Yeah, but that's what Brad brings up here. We haven't gotten to any comments, so we might as well do that now. Could have Donaldson and Hicks on the bench, and that's $36 million pissed up again. Yeah. It is. But and then that's one thing the Yankees never do that. They never ever bench a player and be like, well, I don't care what you're getting paid. Because if that was the case, Donaldson would not have played as many games as he did last year. So they're not going to change their ways. I don't see them doing that now, although they should. But I doubt Donaldson's going to be your everyday third baseman, especially if LeMahieu's healthy. Because if you're not moving Torres off of second, you can't. LeMahieu's got to play somewhere. So LeMahieu can play first, he can play third, he can play second. Great. Which means Donaldson doesn't have to play every day. Peraza is the shortstop. Cabrera can back him up, which I guess IKF would be a third shortstop, though, if that's the case. Again, you don't need three. You don't. So, again, I would love to keep IKF. Ideally, Donaldson just gets cut, and we don't have to worry about him. They pay him not to play for us. And then you just have IKF as the backup off the bench to everybody. He can play third, he can play short, and maybe even second if need be in a desperate situation. But they're not doing that because they would have done it by now. So IKF seems to be the odd man out.
Yeah, because that's why we were making a big push for Donaldson to be the player traded over Hicks. As much as we don't want to see Hicks as an everyday player, Donaldson was the player that really is starting to handcuff the defensive alignment. And that's where the problem is. Donaldson cannot be your everyday player, but because of that contract, they're going to say, well, it's only 1 year. We'll let the other guys continue to develop, and they'll get pushed back into the minor leagues and just wasting away another year. Or until there's an unfortunate injury to occur, we're not going to see these guys. And that's the sad reality of it. As much as we want to discuss it until it becomes true, it's just not going to happen that way. Donaldson was the guy to move, because I think that as much as you had said it a few times on shows, this season for Donaldson can't get worse than last year. I mean, that was as bad as a year that you could have from a quote unquote superstar. That's just not you have to think law of averages. He's going to have a better year to some degree. It may be a small improvement, but it'll still be an improvement.
You would think, but even then, with Volpe coming up soon, potentially even at the start of the season, even though I don't think that'll happen, I think the smart route is you give Donaldson a month and a half, at least go until past the point where the contract can be manipulated for service time. And if he's still playing terribly, which he more than likely will be, and Volpe's killing it, you make the switch. Volpe comes up, you figure out where to put him, and Donaldson's gone. Because if they were able to cut ties with Alex Rodriguez, they can cut ties with Josh Donaldson. You can't tell me otherwise. So there's options. They don't have to rush Volpe, but they can also afford to roll with Donaldson, at least at the start of the season, and see if maybe he does better. Because even if we can get something close to 2021 Donaldson, it's better. It's better. And that's all I'm hoping for. Just give me some home runs. I don't care if you hit 225. Just be a 25 home run kind of guy for me, and I'll live with it for one more year, and then you're gone forever, and we can celebrate. But unless we get that, he's going to be cut at some point this year if he's struggling again. I do believe that, because there's no way they're going to make that same mistake again and roll with him all year, knowing what they have on the team already and who's coming up.
No, it's one of those you have to have. There's no plan.
I think there's a plan.
I don't see where everything is just going to fall into place. I just don't see that situation. Not with this, not with the problems that we're having with our roster is actually too big. You can always, you always want to have depth, but when your depth, is being called up, now you're putting yourselves behind, your backs against the wall. And you're going to either have players that are sitting on the bench, like was mentioned before, that are just sitting there pissing their money away, or the youth is going to be called up and is not getting the deserved playing time. That's where they're really falling themselves, putting themselves in the corner. And we'll get to some of these comments in here because everybody's just really putting out some good points. And one of these from Fortrain, Cabrera could be our version of Ben Zobrist. And I think Ben Zobrist, when you think of utility players, Ben Zobrist is the gold standard. I think he's done it better than anybody has ever done it to this point. So he could be that super utility player. I think that's where his role will definitely hold the most value. And Spencer here, sorry, Bobby, giving up on Florial. It ain't going to happen with him. Never say never, Spence. I know that he hasn't been the firecracker that everybody expected, but he really has not gotten the amount of playing time to let him work out things. So he'll have one good game, then two bad games. But those two bad games is all that they look at, not looking at the tangibles that really bring his value to the table. So I think Florial, especially, I'll ask you this, Spencer, would you rather have Florial in left field every day or Aaron Hicks? I think defensively, Florial gives you the better tick. His bat will come around if given the proper opportunity. And there's no other way around it. And what's going on, LI? And I saw FJ was here. But let's get to my cousin Nick real quick. What's up, cuz? On the road with your pops. They're in New Mexico. They're driving cross country right now. And loving the show as usual. What's up, Rob? And Nick, Dad, and hope you're all having a nice ride. I saw those. I'll post it on my Twitter because they had the sunset pic, the sunrise from New Mexico. It was an awesome picture. And FJ, what's going on, FJ? They're never going to make it seem acquiring Donaldson was a bad move. Yeah. Donald. Well, that's why we kept saying Donaldson, and I was saying Donaldson's the player that's really setting us all back. I think you didn't need to make that move at all. If that was the move to make just to get rid of Sanchez, I would have rather had Sanchez and just move him into a backup role where you don't have to see him every day. I mean, do you think that would have been a situation that would have still appeased the fans if they pushed Sanchez back and put Higgy in the leading role?
No, because Higgy's not good, so Sanchez would have played anyway. Higgy's a fine backup catcher, but if you rolled him as the starter, it would have been a terrible decision. Terrible, because Higashioka can't hit for anything. At least with Trevino, when you got the offense, you took it. I know his bat wasn't tremendous, but he gave you some big hits. Higashioka got you like one hit every 20 at-bats or something like that. It was ridiculous. He can't hit, and he really wasn't that great defensively this year compared to years past. So he's a fine backup. The best thing to do was just trade Sanchez for anything last year, even if it was a couple of low-tier prospects just to get rid of them. They did not have to take Donaldson's contract just to get IKF and get rid of Sanchez. It made no sense. The trade was weird. I remember it's been almost a year at this point. It's been over a year at this point. When the trade happened, I said I was confused. I said, this is such a confusing trade because it doesn't make sense because they're getting a third baseman to play shortstop and they traded one who was already playing shortstop. A third baseman was playing shortstop and they got two third basemen back and a backup catcher who we don't even know if he's real at this point because I still haven't heard his name all throughout the offseason, Ben Rortvedt. Where is he? So if that's the case, maybe he's your backup because he's a lefty and he's a good defender. Who knows? Maybe he can be a solid backup, which maybe you can move Higgy. So it was such a strange trade, but yeah, it's hindering us now because IKF could potentially start, which is a bad idea. And Donaldson, they tried to move him. Guess what? Nobody wants him because he's not good and he's making way too much money. So you're stuck with it. That is to this point, that's going to be the worst Cashman trade in a very long time because it was so bad last year, didn't work out, and it's still hindering us right now. Although I do believe they have more of a plan because Donaldson can be cut. They didn't want to cut him last year because they would have had to pay him for 2 seasons not to play for you. Now, one more year, we were going to keep him anyway. Might as well pay him not to be here. it's not going to be that much of a difference. We've seen teams do it before. The Angels did it last year with Upton. The Yankees did it before with multiple years when they had A-Rod left, so they can do it.
Yeah, no, I think this is that situation where, like you just said, you bite the bullet. You pay him to go away. I think that's money well spent, and especially after what happened last year, because like my point earlier, there's no proof that his improvements are going to justify him playing every day. I don't see where that's an option. And Spencer, you're killing me. So he's like, at the risk of getting banned from the show, that'll never happen. Given the choice between Florial or Hicks. Hicks, why? As bad as he's been historically, he put together hitting streaks and good moments. Yeah, I think he's had moments where, he's been what we needed him to be, but when you're on the IL more than you're on the field, you can't be relied upon to be that, to be an everyday player. I think Florial gives you a better option for every day.
I mean, here's the thing with Hicks. He just didn't have any power last year.
Yeah.
And if he can get that back, which if he puts on maybe he put on too much muscle. I don't know. But if he can get some of that pop back and be a 15 to 20 home run guy, which he was before he got hurt in 2017, I think he was in 2018. He actually had his healthiest season since 2018 last year. My headphones fell out. But he had his healthiest season. And people forget that he actually was one of our better hitters for a good chunk of the season. He was hitting pretty well. He was getting on base. He just wasn't hitting for power. And then he had a drop-off like everybody else did during that second half slump. Unfortunately, everyone's going to remember that one play where he gave up, which is why we want him gone. You can't have that and be like, we're going to bring him back, and that's our starting left fielder. That's what we're pissed about. Do I think Aaron Hicks can turn it around? Sure. Why not? Because like Donaldson, you can't be much worse. But I don't want him here because if you gave up on a play and you had to get benched and you've had a lot of just negative things surrounding you, whether you're complaining or you're hurt, people just don't want him around. He's going to get booed. You got to move on from the player. That's the only, but I don't think, I do actually agree with Spencer. I would, if I had a pick right now, I'd take Hicks over Florial because they haven't given Florial the opportunity to prove that he's better. And it's not Florial's fault, but I do think he's a quadruple A player at this point.
Yeah, he's fallen into that Andujar range where, and there's been other examples, but he's the more recent, where they were too good to play in AAA, but just weren't fine-tuned enough to handle it in the major leagues. And that might be where Florial lands. I do this every offseason, right? In spring training, I do this every year. You can go back to the tapes and watch. But, I'm always making a push for Florial. And I think that's one of the few things that LI and I actually do agree on. But as spring training comes around, we're also seeing, and I want to switch it up a little bit because I want to give some time to the issue with the World Baseball Classic and with Nestor Cortez. And no, it is. I don't think it's a significant injury. I think, next week he'll be fine. It was just a little strain on his hamstring, nothing severe. But he's opted not to continue on with the World Baseball Classic. Do you think that this is something that they should have been doing during the offseason with the World Baseball Classic? Not when spring training starting?
Maybe, but no one really watched it because there's no better time to do it than right now because basketball is about to hit its all-star break soon. Football just ended. No one watches spring training anyway. So the best way to get eyes on it would be to do it right now. If they did it in the off season, let's say November and December, people are going to watch football. That's just a fact. No one's going to watch the Netherlands take on like Japan or something in the World Baseball Classic. Baseball fans would, right? But I'm a huge baseball fan. But you're telling me I can watch, which I know would be a great game, but Puerto Rico versus the United States in the World Baseball Classic, or I can watch the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to watch the football game. That's what more eyes are going to be on. So this is the perfect time to do it because there's nothing going on in sports. basketball is right near the All-Star break. It's soon. I don't know exactly when, but trade deadline just passed. Not really much going on. Hockey's in the same realm, I think. Football's over. It's a perfect time to do it. It's just unfortunate that so many major league players are at risk of getting hurt right before the spring, and then they're going to report late. That's the only issue I have with it, but it's actually a perfect time to do it.
Yeah, I think in order for on the years that they're going to do this World Baseball Classic, I think they need to push back. I think those years need to have a shorter spring training. If you're going to have everything aligned, because now you're going to have these players playing. I don't think you're going to see a lot of these major leaguers. Yeah, you're going to see, they're going to play with pride for their country as they should. But I think at the same time, they might just take it a few steps back and not be as aggressive, knowing that their real moneymaker is going to be when it's all over.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Elliot says here. Why not a few weeks after the World Series? Again, football. Football's not going to dominate the ratings. I'm telling, it's a fact. It's not because I hate the World Baseball Classic, but the only people that are watching it are baseball diehards. The casual fan is not going to be like, if I have my choice over Sunday Night Football or something like that, or the World Baseball Classic Pool C qualifiers, they're going to watch football. It's just a fact. It's just how it works. So Major League Baseball knows this. One of the few things they do know is that the eyes are going to be on another sport. The best time to do it is right now, right after the Super Bowl is over, because nothing's going on in football, and basketball is getting to that break. So it's a perfect time to do it. And it'll be over before we know it. It's going to be a few weeks, and then boom, we'll be in the spring, and we'll be asking for the regular season to start. We're right around the corner. We'll be 44 days away from opening day. It's right there.
I have to agree with you. I think that this is the better time. We're always trying to figure out how to keep baseball in the headlines, and this was the World Baseball Classic during the off season makes sense for baseball, but not for its marketing. I think that's where your point really comes home. Is there's no marketing in it if you got to compete with hockey, basketball, and football. So you probably, it is the better time for it. Now, as far as with the players that, we heard that Brian Cashman has denied Severino the opportunity to play.
Thank God.
I actually was like, I think that's one of the smartest offseason decisions that he's had this year. Besides, I know Severino wanted to play, but I'm sorry. You've been on the IL a lot, and this is your contract year. Do you want to risk it all just to play for a couple of weeks, or do you want to play out a year where you can get you can increase your payday? I think Cashman made the right move.
He did, and it goes back to a couple of weeks ago because originally Acuna wasn't going to play for the World Baseball Classic, and he said it was more important that he's there for his team. Which, by the way, a lot of you guys on Twitter got fooled by a lion, but I'm just going to leave it at that. But yeah, it's a smart decision that Cashman's like, look, you haven't pitched, and we need you, especially right now because Montas is hurt, Cortez is hurt. If Sevy gets hurt, we have two starters in our rotation that can really be relied on, and Cole and Rodon. And guess what? If one of those two goes down, even for a month or so, we're screwed. So our rotation at first was looking really, really strong. Because like Montas is at number 5. We got the best rotation in baseball. He's on the shelf. Okay, we can live with Schmidt or Herman as number 5. Now Cortez is at risk of maybe missing opening day. Who knows? We don't know yet. I don't think he will. But that's your number 4 starter. So now it could be Schmidt and Herman. We need Severino. We desperately need Severino. So very smart decision by Cashman. This is before the Cortez injury.
Yeah. Spencer brings up, he wishes more Yankees were playing. Judge, Stanton, we have the fewest players. I get the reasoning, but it is an exciting tournament. I think, I like the tournament. I really do. And but at the same time, I'm not going to risk my chances for a World Series to win a World Baseball Classic. You know, as much as we don't like bringing the team up, Brandon Nimmo on the Mets said he's opting out because his focus needs to be on winning a World Series with his team rather than playing in this tournament. And I think that Brandon Nimmo is on the right track. I wish that, as much as you want to see all the superstars get a chance to play for other markets, we need to worry about it. Baseball, the MLB needs to focus on its own house first. And I think the players are focusing on the MLB rather than the WBC.
And
And I think that's the right move.
Yeah, you obviously want to see stars. Like I went to a World Baseball Classic game in like 2013, I think, in Miami, and it was great. It was USA versus Puerto Rico. People were having a great time. The stadium was packed. It was awesome. Giancarlo Stanton was there when he was Marlin. I think Beltran was playing at that point. It was a lot of fun. I don't remember who won. I think USA won, but it was a great game. It was a lot of fun. However, if you're an organization, it's like, especially with Severino, you haven't pitched, so you can't put that risk. You can't say you can go out there and pitch, because if he makes one throw, we've seen it with him, one throw takes him out for 2-3 months. We can't afford that, especially right now.
No, I just don't see it worth the risk. I really don't. But we're gonna see how it goes. I think that the main focus, the other big focus that they really need to work on the spring training is going to be your bullpen alignment. I think that's something else that's going to bring a lot of interest from the fan base, seeing how you're going to have, Peralta, King, Holmes, Marinaccio. How are they going to configure those four guys into the 3 innings of the 7, 8, and 9? I think that's going to be, that's going to be more intriguing than anything.
Got to figure out a closer. But one point right here from FJ, absolutely, Teixeira. Yeah. Remember Teixeira? This is why I would love to see more Yankees. Like Elliot says, I would love to watch Judge play for Team USA. But what if he gets hit by a pitch? Or what if he takes a bad swing and messes up his oblique or something, or his hip? What if he takes a bad step on the bases? We've seen him get hurt before on weird, wonky things. What if it happens there? And guess what? We don't have him for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even a month of the regular season, because he got hurt in a tournament that really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They had to make the World Baseball Classic because they took it out of the Olympics, I think. So is it fun? Yeah. Does it mean something to a lot of people? Absolutely. Nolan Arenado said it. To put that jersey on and play for your country, it's great. I understand that, but teams have to be selfish here. So I don't blame the organizations for being selfish, saying, I don't want player A being on the team just in case. I'd rather him get hurt playing for me than playing for a completely different entity. So I get the frustration. No, I'm sorry. I completely went off of your topic. What were you talking about?
The end bullpen alignment, where you have four guys that could really be your 7, 8, and 9. I think it's going to be exciting to see how they're performing in spring training, to see who's going to fit what role best. And we know there's going to be a carousel. That I accept that. I don't like the carousel, but if utilized properly with pitches being used with their strengths, I think it can be a successful formula. We saw that a little bit last year when they were all healthy. But I think that if you had to align your 7, 8, and 9, I actually like King, Peralta, and then Holmes as the 7, 8, and 9. And then you have Marinaccio in the mix in case one guy just had, has already played 2-3 games in a row. You have somebody else. Loaisiga's another name in the hat. You have 5 guys for 3 innings. We could just keep adding names to that. Canely, that's 6 guys for 3 innings. I think they're going to have a very interesting show of performance with the bullpen.
Can't forget Lou Trevino as well. He was our best relief pitcher down the stretch. Him and Marinaccio were the best two. And then before Efros got hurt.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of names.
Efros won't be back until late if he makes it back this year. But they got a great bullpen. I'm not concerned about the bullpen in general, but I do want to know. I do need a closer. I can't have this nonsense of, well, it's Holmes this day and then it's I think it needs to be either Holmes or King, because they both have the best stuff. Clay Holmes' season last year wasn't an accident. He didn't accidentally have a streak that broke Rivera's record, you know? Then he fell off a cliff. So if he can avoid that, he's your best relief arm. Michael King is right there with him, though. When King went down, the entire bullpen just kind of went into disarray. Michael King being back is huge. But I think that's your 8-9, King and Holmes in some order. But Marinaccio is great. I love Trevino. I love Peralta. Canely being back is great. I love our bullpen. I wish we would have added Andrew Chafin because they got him for like $4 or $5 million, but it would have been great to have him.
Well, I had Peralta in the middle just to have that lefty, that lefty switch. We go righty, left, right, right, left, right.
And Loizaga. Forget about Loizaga. Thank you, Brad.
No, I did mention him in the second part when I was saying, then now you got 5 options, 6. I mean,
I forgot about him. I forgot about him.
So, the bullpen alone, I think that's going to our starting rotation is going to have no pressure on them. They're not going to need to eat innings. I think they're just going to be able to go out and just empty their tank in 6 innings and just hand the ball off. And I think that's going to be a way to preserve innings for players like Cortez, who threw a lot of pitches last year. He threw a lot of innings, more than he ever has. The uncertainty of Severino's health and his ability to stay healthy. I think that's where the bullpen is really going to be the backbone to this pitching alignment.
Yeah. Especially when whoever's our 5th starter, Herman's good for maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I would rather it be Herman over Clark Schmidt because Schmidt was really good in the bullpen last year. And I think that might be his role because he's also had injury concerns in his career. So he could be that long man, 6-man, and then he can give you multiple innings. He could be that innings eater if you need it, because the Yankees love to do that early in the season, where they have a guy come in for like 4 or 5 innings and they send him down. But I don't know if he's out of options yet because he might be. So there's going to be something to figure out. But Greg Weissert stepped up last year. He's got filthy stuff. They have plenty of guys that are coming up. Luis Gil's going to be healthy at some point this year as well. Maybe later down the line, so we'll be getting him back. He's another option. There's a lot to be excited about, but the bullpen I think is going to be really good, even better than last year.
No, I don't. And the best thing about how the Yankees have been able to construct their bullpen is, if you look back over the last 5 years, go back even further than that, but over the last 5 years, we have never gone into a season going, our bullpen really needs some help. That has never been in question of the bullpen being able to dominate a game. I think the players that they bring in, when you think of other teams or other relievers, they'll have one good year, one off year, a good year and off year. The Yankees seem to just always figure out how to keep their bullpen focused, and just they don't really have those down years where you're just scratching your head. I think the only outlier to that was Chapman, but he's not even an issue anymore.
Yeah.
But everybody else, if they were calling on anybody else, you were like, all right, we're in good shape. We're in good hands.
Well, up until maybe in 2 years ago, where Chapman became just completely inconsistent, which is conveniently after they signed him to a second contract. Yeah. But yeah, he was the only one that I was like, I have zero confidence in him. Like everybody else, I'm like, okay, even Clay Holmes, when he was struggling, he can still get the ground ball, right? Loizaga, even though he struggled last year, I was like, his stuff is still way too good. Chapman was just throwing fastballs to another planet, so I had no confidence in him. And I am so glad he's gone. And I am so glad a team like Kansas City picked him up, because a certain somebody thinks that their GM is better than ours. But yeah, and also, I guess since we're kind of winding down, LI, who are we trading out of this bullpen? That's our strength. I know we got a lot of relief pitchers, but who are you trading?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe
Trevino.
Your foundation are you getting rid of? Because they're not going to want
Trevino. Yeah. He might be the only one because he's on a contract here. But other than that, you can't trade Marinaccio. No way you trade Holmes. No way you trade Michael King, Loizaga. Wandy's too valuable. I can see Trevino. That's about it. Because they just signed Canely, so if you suggest him, that's not smart.
Yeah, you said Lou Trevino as well.
Okay, that's the only one.
LI's with you. Yeah, Trevino would be the odd man out if you had to trade one of them away. But Brad mentions, that Schmidt still has options. All right, thanks for updating us on that, because we couldn't remember. And I don't know if Luis Gill's gonna be ready for the start of spring training, but maybe you see a performance or two before the spring training concludes.
No, he got hurt like May or something like last year. He won't be back until post All-Star break, the earliest.
Oh, that far back?
It was Tommy John, wasn't it?
Oh, was it Tommy John?
Pretty sure it was Tommy John.
All right. So yeah, you might not see him until after the deadline. If we see him,
he might be a September call up, if anything.
So I think in that case it'd be safe to say that not to expect anything from Gill this year, because even if he does come back, they're going to keep him down in the minors to build himself back up. Yeah, Brad, I think you're right. I think Canely takes Green's role as the fire extinguisher. I think that's actually a good way to put it, because they were able to. Green was great at getting out of the jams. I don't think we saw anybody like that since when David Robinson was in his prime. And LI here, the only reason I'm trading Wandy is because he's a free agent, season's end, and I'm calling the Angels for Jose Quijada. Am I pronouncing that right? Anyway, I don't want to trade Peralta because LI, he's our only lefty right now. You need a left-hander out of the bullpen.
He was doing so well. He was doing well. He said Trevino, which made sense. Peralta, you didn't sign another lefty. They would have signed Chafin, okay.
Yeah.
But they didn't. I don't trade Peralta, no. Unless you're getting a guy with multiple years of control, another lefty for him, which wouldn't make a lot of sense for a team to do, but then that's the only way.
No, there's no sense in the fact that when we needed Peralta to step up, when everybody was going down, he was our constant. He was the final piece in that bullpen where he was getting the ball to just put the game away.
He was the fire extinguisher, like Brad said. That was him.
And I think at one point, after the season, I'm like, I wanted to see Peralta as our closer. I thought that he had earned that because everybody's expecting their closers to just throw heat, where Peralta was a very finesse pitcher that could hit spots. I thought that would have brought a different mental psyche to the batter, where they're so hyped up with all these these speed pitches. Now they have to completely readjust to a more of a finesse guy. So I thought that would have been a good formula. But if you're going to have King and Holmes both healthy, then, right now Holmes has the edge because he was doing it most of last year to be the closer. And Holmes is not a fly, he produces a lot of ground balls. And so you're not going to have to worry about that late inning home run with him.
Second half of last year, he was giving up bombs like crazy.
When he's on his game.
Yeah. But no,
when he's right, the ball stays down.
Yeah, that's because his sinker is ridiculous, and that's something that Lou Trevino said. He's touching triple digits on that sinker. His stuff is filthy. Loizaga stuff is filthy. King's stuff is filthy. The only one whose stuff isn't necessarily filthy, but he was getting it done for us. Like Brad said, he did everything that was asked of him and more. Peralta's stuff is not disgusting, but like it works. Like his changeup's good. He's got some movement, but his pitches aren't moving the same way Loizagas do, or the same way Holmes did, or King's Kluber ball that he started throwing 2 years ago. But Peralta just works. And that was one of those sneaky good trades from Brian Cashman, because what did we give up for him? Mike Talkman. So it's one of those sneaky moves that he makes that works out. That's Cashman's biggest strength, is those lower tier moves that he gets and players just work out for him. But you can't trade him at this point. You just can't, unless they do something similar to what they did with Ottavino, where they moved him to clear his money, but Peralta's not making too much anyway. And then you were to sign somebody else for multiple years. But if that's the case, just re-sign Peralta, because he's not going to cost you too much. He shouldn't cost you that much. Maybe if Chafin got 5, Peralta should get maybe the same amount, maybe a little bit less for multiple years.
Yeah, not more than Chafin, but either match or just under.
Yeah,
but we got to see what kind of year he has too. If he's just as dominant with his craft this year, maybe he gets to the 7 million mark. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's just one of those. Peralta's a wait and see if he can repeat what he was able to do last year. I think he can. I really do. I think that Holmes is going to have his first half on a more consistent level throughout the whole year. And I think Kahnle being back, I think that's going to be he's going to be one of those unsung heroes in the bullpen. He knows how the Yankee organization works. He wanted to come back and kind of, get back into the rhythm of what was started here when he was with us, and bring, get a championship. And I think he's going to have that factor where he's going to be able to help the bullpen pitching coaches, where he's going to be that player coach type of player, where he's going to be working with a lot of the pitchers, especially some of the other guys that are still trying to figure out what works for them. So that's where I think Kahnle's going to really be that X factor.
Well, he's a great personality, and he's the term fire extinguisher fits him so perfectly. Yeah. I love that term there by Brad, because whenever he gets a big out in a big spot, he goes absolutely nuts. And he's someone that you want in the locker room, because it's not like he's being an a-hole or anything. He's just having fun. And the teammates loved him when he was here in 2017 and 2018. I wish we never got rid of him. I wanted to re-sign him when he left, but he was hurt. But what was it? 2020 he got hurt, and his one inning he pitched, he was lights out, and then he got hurt. So I love Kahnle. I'm glad he's back, and yeah, let's see if he can finish what he started with us, because that's the kind of guy that you want in your bullpen. A guy that can get you big outs when you need it. He's got a big personality, and he's a gamer, and he brings some energy to the team and to a game that desperately needs it.
Yep. And I'm looking at this comment here from LI before we head out, and he's pretty much, it's a lot to, he typed out a lot. He had to put it in 2 different comments. That's why I see why we should have traded Peralta and Trino. Plus, they are free agents at season's end, which brings prospect to the organization. You could possibly flip it another deal, but no. Cashman's way too stupid to deal free agents at season's end. Now, here's how I'm going to approach this one. I think that if you have a significant need at the trade deadline and you're having your whole bullpen click, these players, rather than lose them in free agency and get no return, if they still hold their value, do you move them for a player of need that is on the market?
You don't trade Peralta simply because he's your only lefty. I don't know if we have another lefty in the minor leagues that can come up and take that role. I don't think we do. The next bullpen arm that I can think of that's probably not going to make it is Weiser, and he's a righty. I don't think we have a lefty. So if you're trading Peralta and Trevino for simply just prospects, how is that helping you? Because if you were to say, let's trade from a position of strength for a position of strength, then great. Okay. Like you just said, let's say the entire bullpen is great. You can afford to trade a Lou Trevino, and maybe you package him with another player to get a left fielder, because that's probably going to be our biggest need at the deadline anyway. Okay, I'll accept that because the bullpen's going to be just fine. But to trade them simply just for prospects, Wandy Peralta is not going to break the bank. He's not. He's 32 going into next year. He'll be 32, I think. So you could probably get him for maybe 2-3 years, similar to what Chafin just got, because he's not going to be a guy that everyone's going to go look to sign. He's not going to get big relief pitcher money. So you can easily re-sign him. And guess what? You don't have to worry about prospects. Trevino, he's another guy that won't cost you too much. So the Yankees don't need to trade these guys simply because they won't get anything for them. You're not going to get a team's number 5 or 6 prospect for a relief pitcher like Lou Trevino or Wandy Peralta. Because up until last year, Lou Trevino was a throw-in to the Montas trade. Everyone was like, this guy stinks. Look at his ERA. And then the Yankees turned him into a really darn good relief pitcher that he was a few years ago. So these are not guys that are getting you top prospects. You're just trying to trade people just to trade them because you can't re-sign them when you can probably get both of them. This headphone's out. Did they fall out one more time? You can probably re-sign the both of them for like the same amount each year. Like it won't cost you too much. Those are not players that I'm worried about in terms of the payroll, because we're getting so much money taken off the payroll next year. You can get both of them back for like $10 million total at most.
Yeah, if it was 5 years ago in this situation, it's I think that's a different story. But you know, because they're gonna want a better contract. But the 33-year-old relief pitcher is not going to be, like you said, it's not going to break the bank. It's really not. We're talking on a good year, $6 or $7 million that he could be re-signed for, and on an average year, 4 to 5. So what is that really costing you? Especially if you're gonna have players like Donaldson off the books.
Right, and right here, you trade him at the beginning of the offseason, but we didn't really have a clear vision of Michael King yet. We didn't know if he was going to be ready. Yeah. There was uncertainty because Holmes struggled. Loaiza's coming off of a rough year. You don't trade your 2 best relief pitchers from the year before, because Efros is hurt, right? Marinaccio was hurt coming out of last year. Holmes finally got it going in the postseason. King is coming off of an injury. You're not trading your 2 best guys in the offseason just to trade them. And then guess what? Your bullpen, which is your biggest strength, your entire pitching staff, is now a little bit weaker. Because, again, those were your 2 best guys going into the playoffs and throughout the playoffs. Lou Trevino was great for us. Just look at his numbers. He was really damn good. And Peralta was that guy. And then in the playoffs, you couldn't find many pitchers that were better than him in the postseason and the bullpen. So why trade them? Why? Because you can re-sign them for 2 years, and guess what? Trevino, even if you let Trevino walk, you can trade him at the deadline if you need to. Don't let Wandy go. If he's 32 and you sign him until he's 34, big deal. Big deal, because he's not going to cost you $10-15 million a season. He's just not.
No, it's to trade. I don't like trading to trade. I think that's where things get very ugly. And we always, as much as we're talking about our depth, I would yellow by the time the season ended into the postseason. And like you said, and we've said, if it wasn't for Peralta, we don't even get through Cleveland.
Right. So, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we were using Ryan Weber out of the bullpen. Yeah. We had to use Shane Green for a game, and they had to let him go. They were using so many different players. And you say here, Li, that our 2 best guys are Clay Holmes and Loaiza. Not last year, they weren't. Our best relief pitchers were Efros, Marinaccio, down the stretch. I'm talking about down the stretch last year at season's end. Marinaccio, Efros, Peralta, Trevino. 2 of those 4 were hurt in the postseason. So, and they're not going to – Efros won't be here this year until maybe season's end. If he probably won't be here at all. You don't trade these 2 guys. just to trade them. Would I have like to get a Gregory Soto? Absolutely, because he mentioned those two were available. But you're not trading those. You're not trading your two best pitchers from the year before just to get rid of them because you can't, because they're going to be free agents. You're telling me you can't shell out $4 million a year, $5 million a year, even if it's $6 million, to make sure Peralta's back for another 2 years. Trevino, I understand because he's older, and you can probably get something for him while his value is a little bit up. But Peralta is too valuable because you don't have another lefty.
Yeah, that's what it is. Him being our only lefty is the reason why you don't trade him. There's no other way around it. There's nobody that's going to be able to come in and fill the role that Peralta was able to fill. Is there a player out there somewhere? I just don't see it. So not to say that, there's absolutely zero play. I'm sure there's one or two. But it is, I can't get rid of Peralta. I can't go from wanting him to be my closer to trading him. To me, that just doesn't, I can't find the logic to say that.
All right. And if you're getting into the point where you just want to trade people simply to get prospects back, that's what a rebuilding team does. We're not rebuilding. A rebuilding team does not sign Aaron Judge to $40 million a year. A rebuilding team does not have Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon as a 1-2 in the rotation. We're not rebuilding. And we don't I know you can find relief pitchers easier now more than ever.
Yeah.
But I was completely agreement with him when he said Trevino, but then he had to put Peralta in there. You were doing so well, L.I. If you just said you just trade Trevino because you're going to probably lose him at season's end, trade him while his value's up, okay, completely understandable. But Peralta is a no-go for me right now because he was that guy for us last year, and we traded Litke already. We don't have another lefty. If you had another lefty, had they gotten Gregory Soto, like you mentioned earlier, or they signed Chafin, okay, maybe I'd have a little more agreement with him, but I can't. He's about as untouchable to me right now as can be, unless they find a way to get another left-handed pitcher. But there's just really nothing out there right now. No, they would have done it.
And we weren't against, going after, Soto or Puck. It had to make sense to bring them in. That's where it came down to. But this is the roster that we're going to spring training with, so that's where we need to put our attention towards is who do we have right now to root for. You're not rebuilding for trading Peralta and Trevino. No, it's not a fact of rebuilding or not rebuilding or they're our bullpen aces. They're just as close to being our bullpen aces as we can get right now. We saw that last year.
Like, again, I'm not saying that's what rebuilding teams, right? What is every deadline you see relief pitchers get on the move, right? Especially from a rebuilding team. It's like if the Pirates had these guys, trade them, right? Because you can get pieces back. But you're telling me the New York Yankees can't afford to re-sign at least one of these two guys for another 2 years after this season? I don't think they're worried about Peralta leaving. Trevino, they might end up trading because they just don't need to re-sign him because they have Canely for 2 more years. They'll get Efros back next year. So maybe they do look to trade Lou Trevino, but you're telling me they can't re-sign Wandy Peralta for 2-3 years? Come on. That's ridiculous.
No, because all he's going to get is the max he's going to get is at 33 years old. The max he's going to get is 2 years.
No, he'll be 32, I think. So he'll get, even if he gets 3, what's he going to make per year? He's not breaking your bank.
No, so say it's 3 years for for $7 million. $21 million over 3 years is not going to cripple your empire.
It would probably be less than that. He's making what, 3.3 this year? Maybe they sign him to 4.5 or 5. Yeah. 3 years, $15 million.
Because I think that would be his max.
He's not going to make much more than that. Like,
no,
come on, we're not talking about Rivera here. We're talking about Wandy Peralta. So you can re-sign him, but what realistically are you getting for these guys anyway? You're not getting a team's top 10 prospect, top 15 maybe. Maybe you get someone in the top 15, but that's about it.
and that's got to be a team desperate for a bullpen piece.
Right.
So, but I just don't. I don't think he's wrong. I don't think Eli is wrong for wanting to utilize our overflow of bullpen to replenish some positions. I can get behind that, but it's the reasoning behind it. I think that's where we're in a disagreement, and that's fine. That makes sports debates that much more fun. But that's as much fun as we're going to be having today. And we do want to thank everybody in the comments: Li, Brad, FJ, Spencer, Nick, and my father, and everybody else that participated. We do appreciate you. Just remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Check us out on social media. Our handles are under our names. And just remember, as always, wear your pinstripes of pride and play hard.